So what do we mean by the upstander ripple effect?
Stand up against hate and prejudice, even if it does not affect you.
From moral dilemmas in today's headlines, upstanders who rose for justice, and stories of survival.
Be prepared to walk away from this conversation inspired and motivated.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Upstander Ripple Effect podcast, the last episode of 2024. I'm Jackie Congedo.
And I'm Kevin Aldridge. And our theme for today's episode is one of gratitude. And so we're at that time of year, coming out of Thanksgiving and heading into Christmas and Hanukkah, two religious and faith holidays that are essentially grounded in the idea of gratitude and having a deep thankfulness and appreciation for the good things that we have in life. And you know, this is probably a good time to have that conversation because, you know, the holidays can also be a time of great depression for a lot of people and a sense of loneliness. And so good topic for us to have today on how do we channel that gratitude and how gratitude plays a factor in our hope for the future and our outlook on life. So good conversation for needed time.
Yeah. For the end of the year, it's a good time to kind of just reflect, right? And I think in moments like pivot points of reflection, we have the opportunity to kind of take stock of where we've been, think about where we're headed. So it's like what sits in between our past experiences and our hopes for the future. And this catalyst of gratitude is actually really important. And it's not just a fuzzy feel-good thing.
Right.
There's real science behind the practice of gratitude and how that actually primes our brains to be more hopeful. And the benefits of just general well-being, of health related to the sort of taking stock in what you're grateful for. This stuff has been studied, researched by scientists. It's actual, real data backed, proof that this actually has this kind of interplay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I just want to start as we think about sort of the theme of gratitude. It's an appropriate theme for the work that we do at the center because really so much of our work is grounded in this idea of what it is to be grateful. And that's a gift that we get from our survivor community, who came here out of the depths of some of the most horrific experiences you can imagine and stepped forward with not just, an attitude of gratitude, but for the blessings that they did have, right? For the fact that they survived, for the people who helped them. But then, said, we're not just going to stop at being grateful. We want to make sure that we use our voices to educate and to share these stories, so other people can understand, the lessons, and can take stock in what they're grateful for as they come and they understand, these stories of just how bad things could be.
Yeah.
So there's a couple survivors I wanted to just sort of mention, and so many of them. I mean, I would say just about every story of survival that we have in the museum has a note, many notes in some cases of gratitude woven throughout. But the ones that sort of popped in my mind this morning, this year we lost, as I'd mentioned in a prior episode, Renata Neiman, who, at her funeral, her son was reflecting on the gratitude that she was able to hold after all of these years. She was separated from her parents. She was taken in, I think, by a convent or a Catholic school, and as sort of, a maid essentially. And her son later in life asked her, how did you not come out of that experience so bitter? And she said, well, because what I chose to focus on were the droplets of goodness in an ocean of evil.
Yeah.
Which is, I just think about droplets of goodness all the time now. Yeah. Thanks to that. And then there's the story of Al Miller and Mason Bailey, one of the first survivors. We first actually stories we talked about on the podcast, and that moment of him arriving, with the Statue of Liberty and the American immigration official after, narrowly escaping Nazi Germany, his family, and then country hopping, where basically they weren't wanted. Country after country after country, they arrive in New York, and the immigration official shows him just an act of kindness, saying, "You know what? I know you forgot your papers." Hal remembers that moment and the look on his mother's face when he realized, there he was and he didn't have his papers after all that. And he said, the immigration official says, "It's okay. You go back and I'm sure they're in your cabin, and come back and your family will be here and it'll all be fine." And he did. And we know the end to the story. He went on to be a Ritchie boy, serving in the American Army in intelligence and going back as an interrogator. And we named the award, the Upstander Award last year after him, the Award for Gratitude. Why was that? Well, because that moment of kindness unlocked this spirit of gratitude in him that changed the course of his life. And we gave the award to a young man named Mason Bailey in Northern Kentucky who was born with cerebral palsy and went through life wanting to be work in heavy machinery, was told he wasn't going to be able to do it, did it anyway, and then no one would hire him after he got his certification. They were worried about the liability, and he said, "Fine, I'll just start a lawn care business on my own." And he did, and he's still doing it. And when we asked him what his strength was, you would think, perseverance, creativity. He said gratitude, right? Because that's like the gateway.
Absolutely.
To being able to do so many other things is just taking stock in what you do have. So yeah, there's so many beautiful stories of gratitude that come from our survivors and from our work.
Yeah. A few things stick out from that is, gratitude is a matter of perspective. So thinking about Renata, she chose to focus on the droplets of goodness instead of the sea of evil. And that is very much a perspective, how you choose to look at the world. And it's a reminder to me of a song that's one of my favorites. It's kind of a gospel song, and the lyrics say, "No matter what you're going through, there's somebody doing worse than you. So be thankful for what you have, because the person doing bad could be you." And it's always a reminder of, even when we're experiencing tough times, that the attitude of gratitude always says it could be worse. It could be worse. So I'm thankful for, whatever good, even in the midst of the worst situation that I might find myself in, is I've got to learn to focus on that
Savor
and
the
embrace
good.
that. Yeah. And it really is a mindset, because it runs so counter to how we normally think. And I think, we may be discussing here what Dan Tomasulo says about, the preponderance, the percentage of our thoughts that, tend to focus on the negative versus the positive. We tend to hang on and relive those negative things and spend very little time, on the positive. So shifting to this mindset of gratitude, really is something that we have to be intentional about doing. And the second thought I had is that, gratitude also unlocks this sort of pay it forward mentality, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because when you're grateful for experiences that you've had, people who've been influential on your life, things that you've had the opportunity to learn from, gratitude tends to activate that in us, and we get this sense of wanting to pay it forward, to share with others, our gratitude, or extend kindness, to other folks, because we're thankful for and we have an appreciation for what's been done for us. And so, recognizing those two things, gratitude being a matter of perspective, and recognizing that it unlocks, kindness and gratefulness and positive acts that encourages us to pay it forward, speaks to the power of gratitude.
And it's sort of the kinetic energy behind the ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Is, when there's gratitude that hits you, you're more likely and sort of primed to pay that forward. The science behind this is so interesting. So we've had on the podcast a number of positive psychologists on talking about different strengths, and we had Dr. Dan Tomasulo in New York on a number of months ago talking about this idea that you can actually acquire a more hopeful outlook. So it's important, like this gratitude and perspective and hope. Gratitude, perspective, and hope. I believe they are all part of the value family within the character strengths classification of transcendence, right? And so it's easy for us to think, well, I'm not a hopeful person or a grateful person or someone who has good perspective because things have not gone well for me. And once those things go well for me, I will be more grateful, more hopeful, have better perspective. But really, we know from the research that it's actually the choice that you make to embrace those things that sort of fuels a cycle. And so Dan highlights his research around acquired hopefulness, which, like I said back then, I still say now, we can always use more of every day that goes by. And he talks about, what you were saying, Kevin, that by default, our brains are hardwired to hold on to the bad, right? Because that's the survival instinct. It's like, oh, wow, that was painful, traumatic, not good, not safe. And so if I just don't let go of that, then it won't happen to me again, right?
Right.
But if we actually practice gratitude intentionally, deliberately, we can rewire our brains. We can change our biochemistry to instead to sort of prime our neural pathways to have a more hopeful outlook. So, so it's fascinating, and I've seen it work. I mean, I as Dan was telling me this a couple months ago, I'm like, okay, all right, I hear you, and that's cool. But like, does that really work? And he was saying, try it. Try a practice of gratitude every day where you just flat out speak out loud 3 things you're grateful for.
Yeah.
And I did it with my kids, and it was it's actually really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's shifting to a positivity mindset. I mean, if your mindset is always one of negative or hopelessness or, for lack of a better word, oh, woe is me, it's hard to pull yourself out of that. And if you perceive things going badly and that's your attitude, it seems like things tend to spiral because everything that happens now becomes a bigger production.
And that's the biochemistry,
right?
Actually, there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah. And so it's like, it can even be a small thing, but if it's a small thing that doesn't go your way, then it's just like one more thing that you add to the stack that gives you a sense of hopelessness that it's never going to get better. But if you begin to take stock, take an inventory every day of, this didn't go right, but I'm thankful for this. I'm thankful for my kids. I'm thankful, hey, I may not have the job I want, but at least I've got a job. There are people who aren't working, who can't make ends meet or who don't have anything. If you learn to take stock of the things that you do have and not take those things for granted, it does give you a different perspective. It goes back to what I was saying is there's always someone who would gladly trade places with you.
Yeah,
and that's hard to think when you're, or even believe when you're in a tough spot or you're experiencing some hardship in your life. But there truly are people who, don't have movement in their limbs, who are, maybe lying on their deathbeds or, are homeless, or who would gladly, take your worst moment, and it's sort of like that recognition that can give you gratitude even when things aren't going your way. Just having that humility to say, what things could be. Things might not be 100% the way that I want them to be, but they could always be, they could be worse. They could be a lot worse.
Yep. We had been talking about this earlier, noted that perspective is actually necessary for gratitude.
Yeah.
Right. And the sort of a key blocker of gratitude is this idea of entitlement.
Yeah.
Thinking that I'm counting back from 100 here. And so I deserve 100.
Yeah.
Everything should go right all the time for
Right.
me. And so then everything you're counting, well, this didn't, and there's only downhill to go from there.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about, wow, when something goes wrong, retraining our brains to focus on what went right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is actually, as I say that out loud, the whole character strengths mentality is instead of coming at this from a deficit and talking about what's wrong with people, right? Diagnosing the problems. Let's instead identify the strengths that they were able to use to, to persevere, to, the things they can activate to make themselves stronger and to make the world better. And so,
I think that, it's important to really hone in on that sense of entitlement, because I think this is one of the things that helps us sort of move toward gratitude, because the reality is that life is difficult. Life is not fair. Life is challenging. And I think that if you are in the percentage of people who are blessed to have way more good days than you have bad days, you got to be grateful, extremely grateful for that. But I think what happens is, this is where that sense of entitlement comes in. It's like when things are rolling and things are good for us, we expect that it's always going to be that way. And that's not how life is. That
you hit a bump in the road.
If you're fortunate to live long enough,
Yeah.
you're going to experience peaks and valleys in life that are not attacking you, but that's life. That's how it happens. It happens to all. It happens to everybody. It just becomes much more personal and intense when it happens to us, and we start to think like, well, why is this happening to me? Well, we're not special in that regard. Like, we're not exempt from the challenges of life, but it's that sense of entitlement that somehow or another
we expect
that we're going to dodge what life brings, and we become spoiled. And I think that when things do happen, we can experience ungratefulness in that, where we begin to complain and think like, well, why is this happening to me? Well, who should it be happening to? Right. It's like, that's life. That's what happens. And so it's the bumps that allow us to have gratitude, to appreciate when things are going well. Like, man, I gotta be grateful for this and just ride this train as long as I can, because eventually it's got to pull into the station at some point.
Yep.
And so
the heater's going to go out.
Yeah.
My kid's going to come down with, ear infection, both of which have happened this week for you and me.
Yeah.
And here we are talking about gratitude.
Absolutely.
Because, I've never felt more grateful for my health than I do when I finally start feeling better after I've been sick.
Yeah.
That's the reality. But, the other mindset can be, I'm so upset about the time I lost or how bad I felt or that happened to me. Well, instead, just allow yourself to take stock in the fact that that's not your everyday,
Well, think about the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
That was a terrible year and a half that we all went through. We all lost a lot of time. Some people lost their lives. I mean, there was a lot of loss over that year and a half that we went through the pandemic. But how often do you hear people even talk about that now? And it's like we've moved past that in the couple of years. Now, I'm sure there are people who are still dealing with the effects of that, whether that's health-wise or dealing with loved ones who were lost during that period. But by and large, as a society, we've moved past that. We aren't really dealing with that anymore. And maybe we don't express it, but I got to believe that there's intense gratitude among most people that we've gotten back to, some semblance of normalcy and, in our daily lives that we didn't have during that period. And I think if we look back on it, we're grateful to be able to be in a studio today and not be masked up and all of these things. Like that's something that you've got to take stock of.
I was just saying that I want to challenge everybody to start doing these every day, consciously, out loud. Talk about 3 things that you're grateful for. Do it with your family. Do it with your friends. Do it with your kids. And it never occurred to me, since I've been doing this for the past year or so, that every day I could have just added a fourth, and that is that we are not locked inside, staring at each other, worried about, who's going to get sick and who might not recover. I mean, that is a huge gift that you're right, how quickly it falls off the radar of things that just, well, of course, that's the way it is, right? We all walk around in the world and people don't wear masks, and, we can eat out with our friends at restaurants and, go shopping without thinking about it. Gosh, I remember when I was in the shopping for appliances with like an eye mask on, double masked. I don't even think you could see much of my face at all. That was not so long ago.
Yeah.
So.
And think about that. I mean, you would have given anything.
Oh my gosh.
I remember
thinking if I could just go back.
Yeah.
When the shutdown happened, if I could just go back 3 weeks ago, man, I would eat out every night.
Yeah.
And I would I wouldn't just to be in a grocery store made me feel so connected and alive.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking this might never happen again. This might just be our normal forever.
But do you give thanks? But think about so many things that we lost over that year, didn't have access to, that when you think about it on a day-to-day basis, you don't give thanks for that. Like you don't give thanks for, hey, I can go out and have dinner with my spouse and kids at a restaurant. We don't think of that as something to be grateful for. We think of it as this is what it's supposed to be.
That's the entitlement.
So
right.
It's like, even if you take it to, just thankful I have my eyesight, thankful I can hear. For those who lost their taste buds as a result of COVID and couldn't taste food, like, thank God that, I can taste delicious foods that I love to eat. Like, it's all of these things that if you learn to condition yourself to just say, man, if I lost any of that, it would be horrible to my day in and day out lifestyle. And those sorts of things are things that, regardless of whatever else is going on in my life, I should have gratitude for and be thankful and grateful for. So there are a million things. People might not think about it, but there are a million things every day that you can be and should be grateful for, but we take it for granted.
Yeah,
so we don't have it anymore.
Well, this is why, and then we can move to some of our interviews that I think fall beautifully under this theme. This is why the study of human adversity, right? Chapters of human adversity are such rich landscapes to explore this theme of gratitude. Because, the idea that it's sort of, when we're immersed in the histories of the Holocaust, civil rights, slavery, any genocide, other horrific, not to compare, but similarly adverse, the pandemic. It's these sort of moments, it's the droplets of goodness, right? Amidst these times that are so stark. They really, they pop out. And researchers have hit on that. I found a study actually that was done in 2015 by neuroscientists at University of Southern California, who were looking to map the feelings of gratitude in the brain. And you can imagine that they picked Holocaust history to help them do that. So they actually picked 24 millennials with no connection to the Holocaust, and they showed them documentaries about the rise of Nazism and the camps and liberation while they were laying inside the MRI scanner, which I can't imagine. The only thing that would be worse than sitting inside an MRI scanner without any way to get out is to then watch Holocaust films while you are. That just gives me anxiety thinking about it.
I agree.
But they got through that, and that was intended to mirror the experience of sort of going through a museum, a Holocaust museum. And then they sort of shared with them testimonies of survivors who had experienced rescue. And, even sort of shared some scenarios of, imagine this for yourself. And they were able to see the way the brain lit up in different areas with gratitude, and the way those neural pathways connected to other parts of the brain that are responsible for, reward, fairness, self-awareness, these kind of positive feelings. And so the connection between gratitude and actual well-being, just more evidence to back that up. And I just think it's so interesting that, scientists who have no reason to study necessarily positive psychologists, the Holocaust, are using this as a landscape to understand these emotions and these feelings of gratitude.
Yeah. And I know we'll move on to some of our stories and highlights here today, but I always think it's interesting, as someone of faith, our religious texts are very clear on these emotions and the impact for us living healthy, productive lives. And so a lot of times we, even for unbelievers, who might not believe in the faith that we subscribe to, science, verifies things that our faith tells us all the time. And it's like, oh, well, these people study it, and so now there's validity to it. But it's like, hey, this is the tenet of what our faith tells us is necessary to live healthy, strong, productive lives, to make connections with one another. And it's good to see, I always kind of chuckle and smile when I see science that verifies, what our faith tells us. A lot of times people see science and faith as diametrically opposed to each other, but I view it in a different context, that science is often the confirmation of spiritual things, of the explaining and helping us to understand, how God has ordered the universe and has set things up, through God's design. And it's always great to see that confirmation. So I'll get off of my pulpit now. We can move on.
We welcome you on your pulpit anytime, Kevin. You are great on the pulpit. It's interesting thinking about, it does match so well, your role here and your role at the Inquirer and your role in your church. You can see how all of these things have sort of beautifully woven themselves to,
I wish I could say it was by my design, because it's interesting. Every space that I find myself in where I'm doing work was, if you'd asked 15, 16-year-old, even 22-year-old Kevin Aldridge what he would be doing, none of these things would be, would have been, but they were all talents and gifts that I had been gifted with, that, just came together in the right way at the right time. And again,
and I actually shouldn't say that you're not doing basketball, because you are also doing that.
I am. Just not in the NBA like 15, 16-year-old me would have hoped, but
well, there's still time. Hey. It's okay. All right. So pivoting to our stories for this month, the story from our archive is that of one of our amazing survivors, Henry Fenichel, who's still with us. And very active with the center. He was born in the Netherlands. Nazis deported and murdered his father in Auschwitz. He survived as a child with his mother, first in hiding, then both in Westerbork and Bergen-Belsen. They made their way to what is now Israel as part of a prisoner exchange. He immigrated to the United States and was a professor at UC in physics, and he's now retired, and he speaks regularly with student groups and community groups about his experience.
So we have two short clips from Henry's episode of Hear My Story to share with you. The first is Cori Silbernagel, Director of Collections and Exhibitions, starting the episode by thanking Henry. He was the first survivor she recalls meeting when she began here at HHC. She had never known a survivor before, and it changed her and how she approaches her work.
Hi, Henry. It is lovely to have you here today. I'm so happy you came down to the center to talk with us. Before you share your story, I want to share a little story of mine for you.
Okay. That'll be nice to hear.
Yeah. So I started working at the Holocaust Center in 2015, and you were one of the first Holocaust survivors I met ever. I came into the work not knowing very much about the Holocaust and not feeling personally connected. And I think it's because of your story and the story of others that I've met over these years that, there's truly no other work that I feel like I should be doing. So
Thank you. That's impressive.
I think it's incredibly important that you continue sharing your story, and
Thank you. I appreciate
thank
hearing
you.
that. But yeah,
Do you have hope for the future?
I think so. I mean, there are some issues that we have to learn how to deal with them. But ultimately, there ought to be enough of people, positive people like you folks over here, to be able to make sure that we go in the right direction.
Yes, I agree. I think if the upstanding citizens continue to speak and act, that overcomes a lot of problems that we face today.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for talking with me today. Every time we speak, I learn something new about you, and again, as I started, prior to meeting you and other Holocaust survivors, I had little understanding, and I am honored to be in a position where I can sit here today and say that I understand a little bit more. And I'm very excited to continue talking with you many more times to come.
Thank you very much. And I speak for, I think, the other survivors as well. We really appreciate you and the organization and the support you're giving us. We're not left alone somewhere to we have we have a home. You're part of our home.
Oh, thank you, Henry. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Cori and Henry, you're welcome to everyone out there for for if you don't have a tear in your eye, you might just have a heart of stone out there, because just to hear how these, take the context aside, how these two people have changed each other
Yeah.
and the gratitude that they each have for each other is just really powerful. And it seems simple just to say thank you. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for you. But even witnessing those acts of gratitude, I think, is enough to really change the people who are listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think if you saw the interaction, you listen to the voice. When we talk about gratefulness is not just some kind of passing like pleasantry, like something that we do that's politically correct. Like it's a deep, heartfelt appreciation, and you felt that coming through in their interaction, in their voices, their facial expressions. You could see that it actually meant something.
It lit up the person to say it and the person to receive it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's always good to see. And like you said, it's an energy transference from one to another that that not just getting and understanding the appreciation factor for yourself, but then expressing it to the person that you're grateful to, or the situation that you're grateful to, activates again something in them that now they're returning the expressions. And I just thought it was great, what Henry was talking about, and just in terms of his gratitude for feeling like he was not alone, that he had a home, that again someone was listening, to his story, cared about his story, right? Because you got to care about it to go through the work of the exceptional work that you guys do to listen to the stories, to package it, to present it. Like there's care that's involved in that, and I can't imagine being on the other end of that, being the person whose story is being handled with such care. Like that's got to engender the type of gratitude that I think we saw Henry express.
Yeah. I mean, and I just want to also give major respect to Cori Silbernagel, who is our director of collections and exhibitions, and really just the caretaker of our stories in so many ways, our artifacts, our collection, our exhibits. And, Cori, it's hard to imagine someone who could be more well suited for this work. She just cares for the people and the things, things meaning objects, artifacts, that help to tell these stories in a way that's like her own family, her own personal memories and things. I mean, it's really beautiful to watch. And I remember, thinking about what you were saying about Henry and just being grateful that someone was there to listen and to hear his story, and keep the story and share the story. We have a portrait book coming out. It's at the printer right now. Hopefully by the time people are listening, it will be out and available. But it's a portrait of 40 some Holocaust survivors, local Holocaust survivors, and a little handwritten quote from each one of them and their biographies. And about half of these survivors had never shared their story before. And Cori was the one who was going in these people's homes to take their pictures and to hear from them and to document their stories. And you can just tell by her demeanor, she's just so, again, just born to do that. She reflects often, I've heard her share this a number of times, that one of the survivors, when she thanked them for sharing, they said, well, you're the first person to ask.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. And I would encourage everybody who's listening to share your stories, because here's one of the things that I took away from what Cori said. She talked about her disconnection to, the Holocaust and that part of the, the Jewish experience. And it was through the hearing of the stories that she found not only connection, but deep appreciation. And I think all of us can say, as an African American, hearing the stories of what, my forefathers and mothers went through, what they endured, for me to be able to be here today gives me and do what I do, gives me an appreciation for their sacrifice, their hard work, their pain, their struggle, that makes you thankful for them. And so I think, like, if you're a parent, share your story with your kids so that they have an appreciation and a gratefulness for who you are and what you've done to enable them to be able to enjoy whatever life it is that they have. And make them listen. That's the important thing. Like I feel like my father tried as best he could to share some of his stories, but sometimes I was too busy on my own thing with my own friends to want to sit down and take time to listen to that. And, as a 50-year-old adult now, there's not a day that goes by that I wish I hadn't listened more intently to some of those stories. I greatly appreciate, my dad and my mom and everything that they did for me, but I wish I'd have taken more time to listen, document, take in those stories. So if you've got kids out there, definitely make sure that they know your story, they understand.
And this is the time of year when we give gifts. And I'm trying to come up with 8 gifts for my kids for Hanukkah. And I think I might just be like, so you get a Tory every other night. And on the off nights, the gift is a story. I'm going to tell you a story about the people who came before you, who you are.
Yeah.
And what you have to be grateful for in just those things. Yeah. Maybe I'm just going to start giving stories as gifts.
Absolutely.
I love that. I actually love that.
Even recording a video.
Yeah.
Like, even if they don't listen to it now, one day.
Yeah.
Just like, we have the stories of our Holocaust survivors that will live on, through this museum and other means. Think about that in your own family, that even if your kids are too into themselves and what they've got going on right now to listen, there'll be one day where they'll appreciate, you having done that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next story we have is an Upstander story. And this one is from Emily Kendall.
Yeah, this month's Upstander is 2024 Upstander Award winner Emily Kendall. Emily and her husband, Mark, founded Empower Me Living to transform housing options for people with disabilities.
Emily credits her son, Luke, who has Down syndrome, with inspiring her and her husband's work. And she says that one of his strengths is gratitude, and she learns from him every day. Let's listen. We talk in the museum about people meeting their moment, upstanders who meet their moment. And it's just like hearing about the fact that you've been preparing your whole life to be able to meet this moment. You know, I mean, you didn't even, in a way that probably never occurred to you until, you know, now. But the fact that you have this experience, that you've built the skills and the network and the awareness around, you know, how to work in this space. And then, you know, and then there's a moment of need, right? That's like the common story of an upstander is there's strength, there's preparation that I don't even know they're preparing for, and then there's a need. And the difference is the choice that you make to lean in or not. And the fact that you and Mark have so powerfully leaned into this is really inspiring. It's really inspiring.
Well, thank you. I want to say that one of the things that I love about your mission is that anyone is
Can
an
do this.
upstander.
Yeah.
Yes. I want to emphasize that for listeners.
Yeah.
I am just a middle-aged mom from Cincinnati, Ohio, right?
Right.
That's most of the time I'm trying to get 3 children out the door and get my cup of coffee in.
Yep.
And enjoy it before it gets cold,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But that's the beauty, that this power is within all of us. All of us have this ability. Luke, my son, has this ability, and I say that he teaches us more than we teach him.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for him. So his name means light. The name Luke means light. And that is very much what he is.
Wow.
He's my light that keeps me going.
Oh my goodness. Well, quite clearly, and he's doing a good job because you are rolling right along. There's been a lot of research done. I'm thinking about our friends at the VIA Institute on Character, and in particular Ryan Nemec, who has done a lot of research around strengths in people with disabilities. It's like abilities within disabilities, essentially strengths within disabilities, and it so powerfully connects to what you were sharing about your son. What do you feel like his strengths are? What has he taught you?
Oh my gosh. In a world where we are constantly seeking, presence and focus, and there's all these apps, BetterHelp and Calm and the meditating, and we're all seeking for this. Like, Luke inherently already has that.
Wow.
Luke lives his life in the present moment. That's not to say that he does not have his emotions and feelings.
Of course.
He has them, and he moves forward. I would say that one of his strengths is definitely gratitude.
Yeah. Well, that's what allows you to live in the present.
Yes, it is gratitude, and he is not too worried about tomorrow.
Or harping on the
worried
past.
about yesterday. He's like, we're here right now.
Man, really, really very powerful. And I think that, stories like Luke's, and I always find people with disabilities very inspiring in terms of their approach to life, because if there's anybody who you would say has a right to
Be angry,
be
sad.
angry, be sad, be depressed, to feel like, you didn't get a fair shake, a lot of times it's people with disabilities. But, a lot of times when you encounter those folks, they're some of the most joyful people that you'll meet, and I think it's partly because of the attitude that that Emily talked about, just this sense of gratitude, this sense of, being thankful, for what they do have, and not allowing what they don't have to be impediments to them trying to live life to the fullest. And I think, as she said, Luke teaches them more than they teach him. And I think it's a lesson that, that all of us can learn, from that, we need to be more grateful for the things that we do have, because even someone who might have less than you in terms of physical capabilities or developmental capabilities, these are still folks who move forward. And she talked about living in the moment. Again, just going back to another faith thing, scripture talks about not worrying about tomorrow or fretting about yesterday, but living today, appreciate today. Today has enough in and of itself that,
Yeah.
One should be preoccupied with or be concerned about, to live in the moment, to appreciate moments. And a lot of times it's hard for us to be mindful of the moment and appreciate the moment because we're worried about,
What's coming next?
yeah,
Or what happened
or
before?
I can't even enjoy, this concert that I'm at because I'm trying to video record it because I'm thinking about who I'm going to share it with after I get. So, I haven't even been able to fully immerse myself in the situation and be grateful for this work of art or whatever it is that I'm experiencing, because we're always so fragmented in here and there. So I just thought those were some powerful comments from that sharing.
She and her husband Mark and their whole family, I mean, they're really incredible. They won the Frank Gerson Award for Creativity this past 2 years ago. I'm sorry, 2 years ago was our first awards. It's just an amazing story of people meeting their moment, working. I think they were in commercial real estate, and then they had a child with IDD, and realized there was a need for housing that was not being met. And they said, well, may as well be us, if not us, then who?
Yeah.
And they just activated. And so, but the fact that gratitude is a part of that recipe for them and something that, fuels them coming from their son is really special. And it's right alongside with, Mason Bailey, right? Who won, born with cerebral palsy. His number one strength is gratitude, right?
Yeah.
There's something to learn there. I mean,
absolutely.
Open your eyes and pay attention to that. It's like the older I get, the more I realize. It's just the more I realize this. I watch it in my kids. I have a firstborn who is a typical overachiever firstborn, and she's always harping on the perfection and wanting to, and then I have a younger daughter who is who's really concerned about finding the rainbows in the cloudy sky. And it's not to say that one strength is better. We need both.
Right.
But I think as someone who's primed for the first piece, naturally, I'm now as I get older and as I watch my kids, I'm more cognizant of trying to cultivate that look for the rainbow strength.
Sure.
In myself, because it's not something where, I didn't pop out like our youngest who's just looking for rainbows every day.
Yeah.
I popped out looking for what's the next thing I could do to make sure I get it right. And so I just think this idea of these transcendent strengths are so important, and they require a certain sort of maturity and perspective to really take stock in.
Yeah. And I think as you said, both of those are great strengths. And I think what most of us want to do is kind of try to find the balance there, right? Like it's like perfection is unachievable as it is, still should be a goal is an admirable goal to strive for.
Right.
Like try to be better
Excellence,
today
right?
than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
Be the best that I can. Those are the messages that we teach. But I think even in the midst of that, we have to learn how to give ourselves grace and be grateful for and thankful for where we are.
Yeah.
While I'm not where I want to be, I'm not where I was, right? And where I'm at, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
And so that's the looking for the rainbows, even as we strive for what's beyond the rainbow, right? And I think that's the sweet spot, that most of us want to try to hit. I just want to share this because it's a story that I use over and over again, and it has to do with a person with disabilities. There was a video. I might have shared this on a podcast once before, now that I think about it. But it was a video that I saw. It was probably about a year or so ago, and it was of a mother who had no arms, and she was caring for her child, and in one leg, she held her baby, and with the other leg, she used her feet to hold the bottle and feed her baby with the feet.
You have not shared this story before, because
yes.
I would remember this story.
It's a video that's out there. If you can find it, it's one of the most amazing things.
Wow.
And she's not only feeding the baby with the bottle, but then she takes a napkin, uses her foot, wipes the baby's mouth off and everything, just as any mother would do if she had, arms. And it was the most amazing thing that I had ever seen, in that it said to me, like, here is someone with every reason, every excuse to say,
Can't feed
I
my
can't.
baby.
Yeah, can't do it. But she used what she had at her disposal. And I'm sure that probably took an incredible amount of practice.
Yeah,
You know, think about how many fails were probably involved in that before she actually got the opportunity to be able to get to the place where she did it so expertly. And it was very inspiring to me. And I was thankful for seeing that, because it shifted my mind from a can't attitude, that like it's not a matter of capability, right? It's a matter of
Mindset.
mental capacity. You know, that we can do amazing things if we just have the right attitude, the right mindset. That you know, being grateful for what you do have and learning how to take what you do have and try to be excellent with that. So
That's the pivot at the end of the year we should all be finding ourselves in, which is, okay, I'm going to reflect back. How do I take stock in the good?
yeah,
So that I can project that for myself in 2025, for my friends, for my community. And by doing that, the exercise of doing that and other people seeing you do that, it has the kind of effect that this video had on you, which is
Absolutely.
to say that's possible.
yeah,
That's a possible way to be. That's a possible way to live. Things are possible. So, you know, it's good for us, but it's also good for the people who are in our spaces and our networks and our families and our communities to see us do that. To wrap things up for the end of the year, I just wanted to share a few things. First, a couple of shameless plugs, which actually have a lot to do with what we talked about. We have an incredibly busy January in the museum coming up. We are so grateful, speaking of gratitude, to the Schneider family, Hank and Anita Schneider and their children, Ben and Rana Schneider, and Micah and Jessica Max, and even their grandchildren, actually, who came together to support an endowment that's providing free admission in January into perpetuity. Awesome. So if you have not seen the museum, come in January. It's free. And listen to these stories. We have a beautiful new audio tour that we just launched, so you don't even need a tour guide. You can come and listen and take your time. It's a great way to start your year with a grateful note.
absolutely. And even if you haven't, even if you have been to the museum, look, I've been to the museum a couple of times, and it's a pretty expansive place. And like, you don't get to absorb, like, you can come to the museum sometimes and just spend like a day or a half day, like with just a couple of exhibits there to really just kind of like absorb it. So I think, you know, even if you have been, take advantage of the opportunity to come and make multiple trips and spend some time.
Yeah, and we have, you know, speaking of another thing in January, so if you're coming and you've already been to the museum, come back, because we have we're going to be launching a brand new testimonies in our Dimensions and Testimony Gallery. So this is this amazing interactive experience. If you've never experienced this before, it's something you really ought to do, where you can come and have a conversation with a survivor in real time. So this is sort of facilitated through natural language. You know, there's an AI algorithm that pairs questions and answers. It's not an AI experience. The answers, the recorded answers that we have from our survivors are real answers. They are not developed by a computer. They're actually taped from real people. But there's an algorithm that is sort of adaptively learns the more you engage with it to source the real clip that is most responsive to your question. Anyway, it's an amazing experience. And in January, we're launching the first local testimony that we've been able to have in that gallery. And it is the story of Henry Fenichel. Henry, in his own words, sharing his story.
Nice.
Really a powerful experience. And Henry, who I just love for so many reasons, he said he's going to have to come down and see what he says to himself. He can't wait to talk to himself.
Imagine that.
Yeah,
Think about
I know,
that.
right?
A conversation with yourself. That's I mean, I do that probably more than is healthy, but
I think you just did that, actually. You just did that. Yeah, so come down, talk to Henry anytime in January for free. We're so excited about this. And then we actually also are sort of launching a second testimony around 1940s Day, so towards the middle of 25. Al Miller, we also were fortunate enough to capture his testimony in this format. when he was still with us. And so that is ready to go and will be launching right around 1940s Day at the Museum Center towards the middle of the year. So we have an action-packed January lined up. We want to see everybody at the museum. And I would be remiss if I didn't also thank Bob and Lori Fergol and the Jewish Foundation, which made those dimensions and testimony captures possible. Both incredibly generous funders of that initiative. And then lastly, I thought we could just go out on a note of gratitude for the work that we're able to do together. And so, we were talking, Kevin, about how to sort of frame this, how to think about it, and I think really, in my practice of gratitude, like I've said now 6 or 7 times with my kids, we talk about 3 things. What 3 things are we grateful for? I don't know why 3. It's a good number. And sometimes actually they'll say, Mom, can I say a 4th? Or I have a 5th. And I know it's really working, and they can come up with more than 3. But for today, let's just suffice it to say that, the 3 things that I think we're really grateful for here at the Upstander Ripple Effect at the Holocaust and Humanities Center are the people who are courageous enough to let us tell their stories, our survivors, our liberators, their descendants, our upstanders, who have the courage to have the lived experience and then to entrust those stories with us to share them. So grateful for them every day. People who make the storytelling possible, right? Yeah. So that's you, that's our amazing crew.
Yes.
Bob and Josh and Ann and Ron and the staff at our museum, and our board and our volunteers and our donors who generously give of their resources and their time, and their passion and their ambassadorship to make sure that we seize the moment to tell these stories before they're lost to history.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the people who listen, right? Because storytelling requires listeners. It's not just happening in a vacuum, right?
That's right.
The act of, and we saw that with Cori and with Henry, the act of sharing your own humanity and having someone receive that is a really special exchange of gifts, right?
Absolutely.
So gratitude to the people whose stories we are fortunate and privileged enough to tell, to the people who make that possible, and to our amazing listeners and audiences at the museum and our programs here, in our podcast. We're just immeasurably grateful for the opportunity to do this work and for all that you give us.
Absolutely. I am so grateful to be a part of this great journey and this great experience. I'm grateful for the stories, the perspectives, I think all of which have contributed to, making me be a better person, and to be more empathetic towards others. And just, really, again, we talk about perspective. It takes perspective to have gratitude, but gratitude also increases your perspective as well. Yep. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this. I'm grateful for your friendship and all of the great folks who help make this possible. And there are some great folks. I mean, this is one of the things I look most forward to in my month is coming in and doing this, and getting to hear the stories of folks on the crew and what's been going on. And it's just great. It's a great opportunity, and so glad to be a part of it.
It is definitely. What is yours? Half full? Half empty?
Probably a little less than half.
For those who are listening, we're looking at our water glasses. So I'm just going to say both of ours are half full, even though yours is considerably emptier than mine.
Maybe I could have said a little bit more than a third of the way full instead of less than half. That wasn't very grateful.
Mine is just about full.
Okay.
Mine is maybe it couldn't even get any fuller than it is, and that's thanks to all of you. So thanks again. We'll be back in 2025 with more episodes, and as always, how to reach us in the show notes. Please send us an email or a tweet or can you call it a tweet still?
I don't know. Is it an X? I don't call it a post.
A post. Let us know what you're thinking as you're listening. And if you engage in your own gratitude practice, Tell us how it's going. I'm really curious. I'm telling you, it will make you a believer overnight. The way my kids have really transformed through this practice of just on the way to school, what are 3 things you're grateful for? So give it a try and let us know what you think, and we'll see you next year. Let us know your thoughts on this episode. Our email is in the show notes. You can listen anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or visit holocaustandhumanity.org/podcast. You can also connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at Holocaust and Humanity, and X and Facebook at CincyHHC. The Upstander Ripple Effect is a production of the Nancy and David Wolf Holocaust and Humanity Center. The center's mission is to ensure that the lessons of the Holocaust inspire action today. This series is part of the Cynthia and Harold Gutman Family Center for Storytelling. Visit us in person at Historic Union Terminal in Cincinnati, Ohio, or online anytime at holocaustandhumanity.org. Managing producer is Ann Thompson. Consulting producer is Joyce Kamen. Technical producer is Robert Mills, and technical director is Josh Emerson. The opening sequence is by Ken Furman. Select music is by Kick Lee, and this is recorded at Technical Consulting Partners Studios in Cincinnati, Ohio.